Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're doing a Dungeons and Dragons build. This is going to be a bit similar to my Baldur's Gate 3 videos, in which I'm going to give you a level-by-level breakdown on how to use the build and how our choices are going to affect the roleplay of our character. Now, my builds are always about roleplay first, so as such my concepts are a little bit out there, but I also have some fun mechanical goals in mind for the build. So, let's get into exactly what this build is supposed to be. If you've been on the channel long enough, you'll know that I've made two builds inspired by the Call of Cthulhu tabletop game for Baldur's Gate 3, both of them being called the Investigator, and both sort of slightly different variations of each other, but the basic concept you need to know is this. My idea was to take a player character called an Investigator from the Call of Cthulhu tabletop game and apply it to Baldur's Gate 3's rule set in order to create a fun and new take on a character. And today, we're going to be doing a similar thing. I want to create a character that feels like it's from a Call of Cthulhu campaign, but you're actually playing D&D and get some new perks and kind of fun stuff that comes with it. Now, I already know what the first comments are going to be. Why not just play Call of Cthulhu then? Well, D&D is a much more popular game, and as much as I love Call of Cthulhu, it's not for everyone, but I still want people to get that kind of idea of how a Call of Cthulhu Investigator could be played in Dungeons & Dragons to give them maybe an idea, maybe a chance of trying out another system. So, who exactly is this character that we're building today? Now, in contrast to my Baldur's Gate 3 builds where things are a lot more rigid because we exist in a predetermined video game universe, you know, things are going to vary from table to table, and this character might not work for every table. But this character is literally meant to be a Call of Cthulhu character pulled into a fantasy realm, as in, we are a detective from 1920s America. Yeah, the America. Like our America, who was just a simple private investigator who would take cases here and there. However, you also dabbled in, a bit of con artistry, looking into supernatural cases to take advantage of the superstitious and, get some extra money. But the case you took last was a little too real, not quite so supernatural as more Eldritch. And as such, it took both your sanity and even someone precious to you in the pursuit of the truth. You managed to infiltrate the religious cult's gathering place as they tried to use a ritual summoned from an ancient tome to bring forth their deity. A name spoken of in an odd tongue that still rings true in the back of your mind, haunting you to this day: Cthulhu Rale Wagnahi Thatang. I probably butchered that entirely, but you know what? It sounded cool, so I'm going to keep it. So, when you descend on the cult, you attack, gunning them all down with your trusty revolver, and you actually bring the crazed madmen low. However, despite your efforts, in lieu of it all, with all of the cult members, including their leader, dead, the ritual proceeds. The ancient tome being used to summon forth this deity is now working independently. The page is still turning, the words still being chanted. So, in a vain attempt to forestall it, you grab the tome. And for a moment, you see something incomprehensible. An impossible being whose very image can't be penned to words in your journal. All you know is that it saw you, but it didn't even seem to acknowledge you. And then you wake. But you're no longer in that 1920s America, Boston, Arkham, New England, whatever have you. You are very far from home. And all you have left is your wits, your gun, and that strange, cursed book. So, literally, it's an isekai. Which I hate using that term, but it's the most concise way I can think of to explain the concept. You literally pull a character straight from the Cthulhu kind of mythos, your investigator, your character in that tabletop, and slapping it into D&D. Which kind of gives you a Man Out of Time vibe. And again, that might be a bit of a hard sell to some DMs, but it's not like you're playing a time traveler from the future or something who's going to know things about the world and give them an advantage with player knowledge that they shouldn't really have. No. You are the biggest fish out of water ever, dealing with forces you cannot really hope to comprehend, and all you've got is your detective abilities to see you through in this brand new world. So, I think it could be a really fun and interesting concept to play. But again, it's DM dependent. If they want you to make a character that is from the setting, then obviously this isn't really going to work, and that's probably the hardest sell, but I feel like most experienced DMs, or even newer DMs, who just like the concept and want to give you the ability to be as creative with the roleplay as you can, we're probably going to allow this. Now, with that kind of preamble out of the way, and kind of giving you an idea of the character that we're going to be building, there are some disclaimers I have to get through. First off, I am still new to building for D&D 2024 in a way. While I have a lot of experience with the game now, being in multiple campaigns and even running one myself, as of now, I'm going to make mistakes. Not necessarily bad faith interpretations, but more or less I might get some numbers wrong here or there. I might accidentally misread, what a cantrip does, or like a spell or something. I'm going to make mistakes here and there, so please feel free to correct me. Second of all, I'm not going to be doing a full build video all the way to level 20. I don't think this build requires that. In fact, I think after a certain point, it's pretty much free to kind of build however you want after the fact. So I'm only going to go up until I think the build has a solid foundation and we pretty much have everything I want to make the build complete in a sense, and then you'll be able to go from there. So while this is going to be a level by level breakdown, we're not going all the way to level 20 or even level 12 like my Baldur's Gate builds. You'll see what I mean as we go. And finally, there's obviously going to be a lot of more kind of mechanical talk as well, compared to maybe my Baldur's Gate 3 stuff, because with my Baldur's Gate 3 stuff, I assume most people know how that game works, whereas D&D can be a bit more complicated in some ways, because you have to manage all the rulings yourself, so again, could be mistakes. But really, that's it for now. So, with that disclaimer out the way, let's get into the build. So, our goals for this build are going to be the following. Again, let's have a look at a Call of Cthulhu character sheet. It looks like this. You'll be seeing one on screen now, which, for some of you, may be a lot if you've only played D&D. But basically, the long story short is that all of those, kind of words you see in that middle bit there, those are skill proficiencies. A bit more than what D&D normally does, but of course, a lot of them are a bit more niche and situational. The whole point of a Call of Cthulhu investigator team, your party, is that you are all very experienced in a diverse range of skills, where some of you are a bit more specialized in some areas than others, and you're supposed to compensate for each other's weaknesses. And I'm going to do a little bit of that today. While I want us to be able to pass as many skill checks as possible, I do also want us to be able to rely on our teammates for other things as well. And if you roleplay this character right, you're going to find that this character synergizes really, really well with a good and complete party. And you'll kind of see that as we get through the leveling scheme of about just how much you will need to rely on your party for this one. But you're still going to be basically kind of an amazing support social character. Again, you're going to be kind of supportive in combat, while also being able to deal out some damage here and there, but you're mostly going to be supporting your allies, whereas out of combat, you're going to have a lot of stuff to do, and are pretty much going to be the main party face in a way. So that's kind of how you're going to be playing this character. We're going to take this Call of Cthulhu character sheet and stuff as much of it into D&D as possible. But how are we going to do that? Well, first off, we want to be able to get as many skill proficiencies as possible as soon as possible, with a couple of exceptions that I'll talk about a bit later. So yes, this is going to be a skill monkey build, and trust me, we're going to get those skills pretty damn quick. But we don't just want to have those skill proficiencies, we want to grant ourselves as high of a chance to pass those skill checks as possible, either by gaining advantage or boosting our odds through certain methods. You'll see what I mean as we get further in. I want you to be able to be a true detective. I want you to go into a mystery or just any situation and be able to use your abilities, your ability to find clues, your ability to spot hidden details, your ability to persuade, intimidate, and deceive your way through any sort of situation until you're able to find the truth. You're going to be able to solve any mystery, talk to any witness, catch any criminal. We want to be the ultimate social deduction character. However, that's all well and good. Those three things there are going to make a Call of Cthulhu investigator. You'll have a wide array of skills that you can use to solve any social situation and be able to crack down on the mystery. But D&D isn't all about social situations. There is the dungeon delving and combat side of things too. And as such, we're going to need to take something... we're going to take things a slightly different direction than a standard Call of Cthulhu campaign. We have that cursed book for a reason. And as such, we're going to need to tap into some of its power in order to survive in this new and strange world. So, of course, we're going to get into the Eldritch magics, which means psychic stuff. We want to be able to use illusion and enchantment spells to give our allies an edge in battle while keeping ourselves out of danger. And we also want to be a powerful psychic who can use all sorts of telepathic abilities to deal large amounts of psychic damage, potentially driving our foes mad. Oh yeah, this one's going to be fun. Final thing I'll say before we get into the build is that everything here is from the D&D 24 Player's Handbook. I have not included any materials from supplementary books that have come out since I originally conceptualized this build, that being, like Heroes of Faerun, or, Eberron, Forge of the Artificer. We're just going to be sticking to the base Player's Handbook today, and honestly, you'll be surprised how much we can get done with just that. However, obviously the BG3 people in the audience here are probably going to want me to do some stuff with the Heroes of Faerun book, so let me know if you want to see that. Anyways, let's start off with level 1 of the build. We need to talk about our starting stats first, and this is where a lot of people are going to click off the video right away. Listen, when you play Call of Cthulhu, you are not a hero, you are not a fantasy strong boy, you are a regular human who will die to a gunshot. So, here are the stats. Yeah, this is when I said we had to rely on other party members, I meant it. So while obviously we don't want to steal the spotlight from people all the time when we're outside of combat doing our social deduction, obviously that is going to be our main bread and butter. So in combat we are definitely going to be reliant on our party members, but once we start getting into our abilities, you won't believe how much synergy you can have with pretty much any combat character, or even just regular, magical characters. Like, trust me, these stat points will make sense. But let's talk about them. First up, 8 strength. I mean, we were going to have a dump stat here with point buy. Roll for stats if you want, obviously, but and if you roll a good array of stats, and that might be the better way to go. But maybe if you are rolling stats, roll your stats first before deciding to play this character, because you're going to want a lot of points in a lot of different things. But anyways, back to point buy. Strength is at 8. We are a squishy regular human. We are not going to be jumping over chasms in a single bound, we're not going to be climbing rock walls, we're not going to be throwing people or objects around like it's nothing. We are not a barbarian, we are not a fighter, we are a regular guy. And as such, our strength, dexterity, and constitution are going to be pretty low. Strength being the lowest, as we're not really going to need it. There's only one skill proficiency tied to strength, that being athletics, and it's not really something that I'm gunning for pretty early, because again, it's not really going to be our forte. We're going to leave that to the barbarian of the party. Same with our dexterity. It's going to start off at 10, but we're going to give it a bump later to give our AC a bit of a boost, and also our dexterity-based skills, but again, they're not really our focus. There's not too many dexterity-based skills in the game that we're 100% going to need, although stealth and sleight of hand are going to be nice. We will have ways of bumping those up pretty significantly later. A plus 10 to our constitution, plus 10? No, a base 10 of our constitution is also not too great. Not in the negatives, but obviously not perfect, and that is for a reason. Again, we are a regular person. We are not even from this fantasy world in this setting. We need to remain vulnerable, and trust me, combat gets a lot more exciting when you really have to think outside the box, because you can't just plow yourself into every situation using magic or weapons. You really have to think about how you approach every situation, and the clever strategies that can come up with the things we're going to get in this build, you're not even going to be thinking about that constitution score too much, because honestly, it's going to get interesting. Now, our mental stats is where it's really at. 14 in intelligence and wisdom, and a 15 in charisma. This allows us right at the start of the game, to have a +4 in all proficient intelligence and wisdom skills, and a +5 with our charisma skills at level 1, because we're going to be bumping that up in a minute. Strength and constitution are obviously deliberately low, as I said, to encourage winning fights with careful planning and strategy, as opposed to direct combat. And trust me, the strategies are fun. You'll see as we get further into the build. Now, our species of choice is absolutely going to be human. Again, we come from real-world America. Arkham, New England, what have you. So, we're going to be a human. And to be honest, it's the best species for this build, because not only does it get an extra skill anyway, we're also going to be able to pick up the Origin feat Skilled, giving us 3 more skill proficiencies. So that's 4 just from our species. Our skills of choice at this point are Medicine, from our extra skill from Human, and from the skilled feat we're taking Arcana, Intimidation, and Persuasion. Intimidation and Persuasion obviously being important social skills to have, as well as Arcana being our knowledge of our Eldritch Tome that we carry on our person at all times. So, we have a little bit of magic knowledge, just maybe not in the way that you think. And even though we have, good arcane ability, don't just go around saying that you know everything about magic from this new world you find yourself in, because, you know, that's going to take some, you know, initiative, like some kind of, that's just going to take away from like your wizard or sorcerer in the party. So maybe kind of work together with them. But maybe, again, your book is giving you awakened intelligence that you wouldn't normally have access to, so it might also make sense. Make sure you roleplay this correctly. This is a team game, after all, despite the fact that you're kind of good at everything. The reason I'm taking these specific skills here as well is because I don't want them to overlap with our skill choices that we're going to be getting from our class and background as well. So, while it may seem somewhat random to take the skills in the order that I am, it's actually very deliberate, so make sure you follow the build along to make sure that you don't accidentally have skill proficiencies that overlap, losing out on potential opportunities for more. You're also going to get a couple of languages from your species, and while Common is going to be the obvious one, I'm just going to assume that in your games Common is the equivalent of English, so that you're not going to have some sort of communication issue at your table. But it gets weird because you really shouldn't have any knowledge of languages like Elvish, Dwarvish, or anything like that. I would say you could argue that, again, with the Eldritch Tome, maybe you'll have access to like whatever language that your DM would use for Great Old Ones. Perhaps Abyssal, not sure, just something weird and out there. But I actually think there's another option that would work really, really well, and that is Sign Language. You see, in the 2024 rules and in Foundry, which is what I use to test these builds, Sign Language is actually an option, Common Sign Language. And by God, would that not be a cool thing for kind of a investigator to have? Not only does this mean that you could talk to people who are hearing impaired a lot easier, again, no witness cannot be spoken to in our character build, you also would actually be able to teach it to the rest of the party and then have a silent method of communication as long as there's line of sight without any need for magic, which could be extremely potent if you need to be in a stealthy situation. It just has so many fun roleplay uses that I think if your DM is willing to allow it, Sign Language would be my exotic, I guess, language of choice. It really, really does work. So, we now have 4 skill proficiencies before even choosing a class or background, which is awesome. Plus, that extra bit of flavor from our language choice just works so well. Now, for our background, we've gone with Charlatan. Again, your whole business, aside from being a legitimate private investigator, was conning people out of money because of their superstitious nature. And so that kind of, deceptive nature has taught you to take investigations from an approach that maybe most others wouldn't if they were slightly more above the law. And again, this background just gives us access to so many things that are going to work out so well for us. So, let's talk about it. First up, our ability score improvements, a +2 to dexterity and a +1 to charisma. This is going to help out our dexterity proficiencies as well as our AC just a little bit, bumping it up by another point, as well as that +1 to charisma is going to round out our charisma to give us that juicy +5 to our charisma checks. But of course, the origin feat that comes with the background for Charlatan is the skilled feat again, because you can take skilled as many times as you have skill proficiencies to gain, so now we're going to get another 3. This time, history, nature, and religion. Again, in a similar vein to Arcana, if you really are doing this whole person in the new world thing, you're not going to have any, knowledge of this world's history or its religions or anything like that. Nature might overlap a little bit, but obviously the more fantastical elements like druids and such like that, or just fantasy fauna and flora, aren't really going to be part of your kind of knowledge base right off the bat. You could treat it again as an awakened intelligence from the Eldritch rituals, or you could treat it as this is your knowledge of your own world history and that you can apply the similar themes through deduction and, study to the new world you find yourself in. So, while you don't inherently have that knowledge right off the bat, you can acquire it with ease through deduction and study, which is what these skills are going to be about for you. So again, a bit more DM dependent, but it could definitely still work for you. And of course, the 2 background skills from Charlatan are Deception and Sleight of Hand. So now we have our final Charisma skill here for a little bit. We now have all of the 3 that we need, that being Persuasion, Deception, and Intimidation, and Sleight of Hand being another kind of dexterity-based skill, where we get to do some fine hand movements and such like that, swipe things from people's pockets, gather clues without people noticing, etc. I think this works really, really well for us, because now again, that's an extra 5 skills. Damn. We still haven't even talked about the starting class yet. So, we're choosing to play as a normal human. To start, at least. So the best option for that is going to be Rogue, because we're not going to suddenly have mastery of magic or of all weapons and armor. It's just going to give us our basic equipment to get the job done, and Rogue is going to give us that, simple weapons, which I think a normal human can reasonably use. However, of course, we're also going to gain 4 more skills and 2 expertise. Those 4 skills being Insight, Investigation, Perception, and Stealth, which do I even really need to explain? Perception and Stealth are obvious picks. Perception is going to allow us to notice things in our environment without us specifically having to look for them, as opposed to Investigation, whereas Stealth, obviously, we're going to want to be stealthy at some points. Even with our slightly lower dexterity, our proficiency bonus here is really still going to help us out. However, our expertise is going to be going into Insight and Investigation. Insight, obviously, it's for reading people, telling when they're lying. It's going to help you get started. You're going to be rolling Insight before you're rolling anything like Persuasion, Intimidation, or Deception when interrogating witnesses or potential suspects. Insight is going to be one of our biggest skills for playing this character correctly, as well as Investigation. You're going to be an investigator, you need to investigate. You need to be the best at it that you can, so putting your expertise here is going to be pretty damn important. So, we're also going to get Thieves' Cant here, as an additional language, but I would not rule this as like you literally have access to like some sort of like Thieves' language. I think this is more you're more able to pick up on these subtle hints hidden in dialogue that people speaking in Thieves' Cant would have. So rather than you straight up knowing it, you just know how to recognize coded languages, and as such can help you with your investigation even further. And you could even say, again, it's enhanced by your now enhanced awareness from your psychic abilities. Stuff like that. You know, we can all flavor it as just psychic bullshit, if we need to. But no, I like Thieves' Cant here as well for just being like an extra bit of flavor to our deductive reasoning. The only thing that we're not really going to be using from our level of Rogue is Sneak Attack. We're not really going to be wanting to get up close and personal with people, but if you happen to be within stabbing range with a dagger, you might as well take that extra damage. But honestly, spoiler alert, we're not really taking any more levels of Rogue in the video that I'm showing here today, so Sneak Attack isn't really going to scale up much, nor are we going to be getting the extra features that come with it later on. So really, it's just here if it comes up. But if you play this build right, it probably isn't. So that's a bit of a waste, but otherwise, at level 1, you're already pretty much the perfect detective. You have all of the social and deduction skills you need to, gather knowledge and, get things out of suspects and witnesses. You can pretty much already solve the case at level 1. You are the detective. So how do we evolve beyond that? At level 2, you're going to multi-class into Warlock. I mean, come on. You all saw this coming, right? How could we not use Great Old One Warlock in a Call of Cthulhu build? It just makes sense. So, let's talk about what level 1 of Warlock gives us. We're now going to gain access to invocations and spellcasting. The build is going to start taking off immediately because of this as well. We're going to take our main attacking cantrip as Mind Sliver, which is going to deal psychic damage and will debuff enemy saving throws, giving the whole party an edge in combat. And also if we want to follow up with our own spells later on that require saving throws, which is going to be a lot of them, that's actually really going to help us out. So just having a powerful damage cantrip with a damage type that's not often resisted, and being able to impose saving throw debuffs, you're just already taking on that support role with our first cantrip choice. Now, you're going to be also grabbing an Eldritch Invocation at this level, which means you're going to be picking up, unsurprisingly, Pact of the Tome. This is going to give you access to 3 cantrips from other spell lists, as well as 2 spells from other spell lists as well. So let's talk about, so I'm going to treat this as just kind of our general spell and cantrip picks. So some cantrips we're going to take from outside of the Pact of the Tome, and some cantrips we are going to take from Pact of the Tome. So let's talk about all of our cantrips here at once. We're going to be taking Minor Illusion from the Warlock spell list, Guidance from the Cleric spell list, and also Thaumaturgy from the Cleric spell list as well, because these are all going to be used to enhance our ability in social situations and espionage. Minor Illusion obviously can create an image or sound around you to really mess with people's minds. as well as you will have guidance, which will give you yourself or your allies a buff to their skill checks. I believe guidance cannot be used on yourself like Baldur's Gate. I will have to double check that actually. Guidance actually is any willing creature within touch range, so I'm going to assume that can include yourself, giving you a d4 bonus to your skill checks, which is awesome. And Thaumaturgy can give you advantage on intimidation checks, both of which are really going to help us out. Thaumaturgy also has a bunch of different flavor effects on top of it as well, outside of just what things like BG3 do. So overall, it's just going to be two very flavorful cantrips that will be great. So honestly, I think those three cantrip choices alone are already just giving you so much. But you're also going to be taking Mage Hand from Pact of the Tome as well, from the Wizard spell list, which is going to be our basic form of telekinesis, providing a bit of utility and obviously some flavor. While the Mage Hand is not going to be invisible, like for, say, Arcane Trickster Rogues, Mage Hand Legerdemain, it's still going to work out pretty well for us as, again, a basic form of telekinesis at this level, so we're certainly going to be taking it. Now, for our spells, we are going to be taking Comprehend Languages from Pact of the Tome. This will allow us to talk to almost any NPC, so now that language barrier that we had earlier doesn't really apply anymore. So now, there's no witness that we cannot speak to, which is awesome. And we're also going to be combining this with Identify that will allow us to analyze any clue we come across. This is done flavor-wise by drawing on vast knowledge unknowingly provided by our patrons. So again, that kind of psychic Eldritch awakening. So with all of that combined, we've now fixed some of the problems that we had last level with the comprehend languages thing, and as well as Identify is going to allow us to understand things that we wouldn't normally be able to through magical means. So we're already covering a lot of bases on the investigation side with just these spells. However, we're not done yet, as we also do get two more spells from the Warlock spell list. The first one we're going to take is Detect Magic. This is going to help us by being paired with Identify to help us find magical clues or maybe even hidden dangers. Being able to detect the various schools of magic, see the auras surrounding them. Detect Magic is going to be a really good investigative tool for the more fantasy side of the investigation. We're also going to be taking Speak with Animals, which will allow us to interrogate animals as witnesses, and also kind of makes it so that we don't need to take animal handling, as we can use our charisma skills instead. Now, obviously, there are going to be some interactions in tabletop as opposed to BG3, where animal handling will still be used even with Speak with Animals, but we don't really need it as much if we have Speak with Animals in the first place, at least in my opinion. But again, that's DM dependent. But it does mean that we don't need to take Speak with Animals, but animal handling, but you will still have the opportunity to take it later if you so desire. So yeah, that is our first level of Warlock, and already at total level 2, we might just be one of the best detectives ever. The only thing that's going to be screwing us over a little bit is our limited spell slots, but again, a lot of these spells are rituals, which means you should be able to cast them without expanding a spell slot as long as you up the casting time a little bit. So you're like Batman. With a bit of prep time, you can basically solve any mystery. Let's talk about total level 3, and that is our second level of Warlock, because we're pretty much going to be sticking with Warlock now for the rest of the build. We're going to get 2 more Eldritch Invocations here, and we're going to be taking one of those twice. Again, you probably saw this coming. There is an Eldritch Invocation called Lessons of the First Ones, which allows you to basically take 2 more Origin feats. So by picking the same invocation both times, we're going to be grabbing those 2 feats right away. We're going to be taking Skilled again, granting us 3 more skills, that being Acrobatics, Performance, and Survival. Acrobatics is just going to be kind of our general ability to kind of maneuver around tricky situations that require a bit more dexterity. Performance, I mean, it's just there if we want to be a bit more theatrical, and then Survival is just, again, our ability to survive. However, our second Lessons of the First One pick is going to be the Lucky Feat. This means that we are going to be able to gain advantage on any D20 test, meaning that we can make our odds of succeeding skill checks even higher. And with Lucky scaling with our proficiency, giving us more uses as we level up, it is a consistently useful feature to have. It can also actually be used defensively to grant disadvantage on an attack roll against us, if we end up out of position and are attacked directly in combat. And because of our choices that we've taken here, we now have proficiency in every skill of the game, barring 2. athletics, and animal handling. Again, I've already made my case against animal handling because I speak with animals, but again, you will have the opportunity to take it later if necessary. And athletics is just not really needed, as it's just, again, we're not meant to be a physically strong character. However, you can pick it up later. And maybe, again, flavor acrobatics is heightened reflexes due to our newfound psychic powers. Could be fun. We also are going to get a spell at this level, which, of course, we're going to be taking Charm Person, as I think it would be more useful than maybe taking something like the Friends cantrip, just because of the duration. And we also get another Warlock spell slot at this level, so we get to use a few more of these spells anyways. Now, at level 4, we are going to be a Great Old One Warlock, as we now get to pick our subclass. So we're going to take the Great Old One Patron, as well as a few more subclass spells that are automatically going to get added to our spell list, as well as a couple of new features, all of which are going to be good. The build is now going to amplify the abilities that we already have. We're going to be gaining the Detect Thought spell, which now allows us to gain clues from suspects where we wouldn't normally be able to by straight up reading their minds, as well as being able to detect the thoughts of hidden enemies. We're also going to be picking up Dissonant Whispers as well, which will allow us to strike fear and deal psychic damage. And we're also going to be picking up Tasha's Hideous Laughter to give us a bit of battlefield control. We're also going to be getting Phantasmal Force added to our spell list here, which is just a nice extra addition. However, we gain 2 new features from our subclass here: Awakened Mind and Psychic Spells. Awakened Mind is an amazing feature, which is going to allow us to use our silent, kind of secret communication between ourselves and a party member. It's going to allow us to link minds with a party member who is within range, and we can speak telepathically. Now, some of you may be thinking that makes the sign language choice from earlier redundant, or redundant, I should say. However, we still kind of want to have both in a way, because you can only mind link with one person at a time. And again, if something is like, if you are being psychically sensed or magically sensed, you might want to be able to communicate without it anyway. But again, being able to have a psychic link is going to be very, very important, and I'll be getting into why a bit later. But our true power here, our true power-up, is gained from psychic spells. This allows us to turn any spell damage into psychic damage, which can give us more options for offensive spells later down the line. However, the best part of this feature is that we can cast any illusion or enchantment spell without the verbal or somatic components. For those of you who are new to tabletop, verbal and somatic means that you would need to speak magic words for verbal, and somatic would mean you need to do hand gestures. Now, we can cast illusion or enchantment spells completely anonymously. That's insane. There's also, so that means basically we cast these spells without needing to speak or move, so we can basically cast them in most situations, and in a lot of those situations, you would be able to do so without anyone knowing who it even was who cast the spell. Imagine how useful that could be for someone who is a detective. And using the spells and cantrips we already have, we can now use our entire arsenal in powerful and creative ways. We also do get to choose a Warlock spell at this level as well, not just the stuff that's added from our our subclass even, and as such, we're going to be taking Suggestion. Because, I mean, come on, it's suggestion. We can suggest people into doing stuff for us. That's a psychic ability, as well as could be a great way to get the information that we need. Now, moving on to level 5, we're going to have Great Old Warlock level 4, which means we get to choose another cantrip. We're taking Eldritch Blast. We finally take Eldritch Blast at this level to give us a solid and reliable damage cantrip that isn't just Mind Sliver. And we can also choose to have it inflict psychic damage using our Psychic Spells feature. So, if you don't want to use Force, you could use it as psychic damage, which could actually be pretty damn cool. A Psychic Eldritch Blast sounds amazing. However, I don't just want to take Eldritch Blast because it is the powerful option. I actually want to take it so you can flavor it as you're firing these blasts of Eldritch power as a replacement for bullets from your old gun from your previous campaign. Like, again, you were armed with a revolver. That's how you gunned down the cultists in our opening. Now we get to use it again. You've run out of bullets. You haven't had bullets up until now, but just imagine firing an Eldritch Blast, a psychic Eldritch Blast out of an old 1920s revolver. That sounds cool as hell. I love that idea, so that's why I'm taking Eldritch Blast here. We're also going to get an ability score increase, and as such, we're going to be taking a +2 to our Charisma to increase our spell save DC to 15, and our Charisma-based skills will now have a +7 modifier with proficiency, which is amazing. In addition, because our proficiency bonus went up this level, all of our skills now also increase by 1, as do our amount of lucky charges. So this is just an overall amazing level for us. It just gives us another solid damage option with a fun bit of flavor attached, a big boost to our main stat of the build, as well as a buff to our proficiency, making us better at everything that we do. We also now have a new chosen spell as well from our Great Old One levels, and of course we're taking Crown of Madness. Again, we want to make our enemies roll for sanity just as we had to in Call of Cthulhu, and as such we get to make our enemies mad, making them attack each other. Again, we are now the Eldritch monster ourselves, and perhaps the roleplay aspect of that can come out as we're starting to get a little bit more unhinged ourselves, just like an actual Call of Cthulhu character. And now, for the final level for this build, I know, I did say we weren't going to go through all of them, we are now at total level 6, and as such, at Great Old One Warlock 5. Which means we're going to get 2 new Eldritch Invocations, and some more spells from both our spell choice and our subclass. This build is going to get another pretty good boost here. We're going to be able to pick up our first Eldritch Invocation, which is Devil's Sight, which is going to make up for our lack of dark vision, so now even darkness can now not stop us from finding clues, and we're also going to be taking Tongues as our chosen spell, which allows us to now truly communicate with any creature, not just through comprehend languages, turning us into the perfect investigator. However, we're going to be taking another invocation here, and we're going to be taking Gaze of Two Minds, which is going to be one of the most important features for this build's combat-capable aspect. It's going to allow us to choose one of our allies and remotely be able to use their senses, so their sight and their hearing, etc., but also we can remotely cast spells through them. This means that we can sit on the backline in combat, hiding away from our enemies, while letting that barbarian who's taking up the front line cast Eldritch Blast. Is that not the coolest thing in the world? And because we pair this with Mind Link, we can also talk to our ally that we are effectively remote controlling, allowing them to fire off Eldritch Blasts. And again, because we borrow all of our allies' senses with Gaze of Two Minds, it's not just Eldritch Blast. There's almost no restriction on what spells can be cast this way. For example, there's no sight restriction, because a lot of sights need, a lot of spells need line of sight to the enemy, but because you're casting from a different line of sight, it still counts. Now, I hope that's not a bad faith interpretation of the rulings, but there's nothing in any of the books or any sort of discussion I can find online that directly contradicts that. So again, as long as you yourself are within range, and that is the caveat, I'll talk about that in a minute, you can cast spells through an ally, which is just amazing. That can really help you. However, there is a caveat. In fact, there's two. The only caveat is that we have to keep using our bonus action every turn to maintain Gaze of Two Minds. But since most of our features and spells use our action, this isn't really an issue. However, there may be some DM's interpretation of where your character themselves needs to be within the range of the spell. So say we're talking about a spell that has a range of 60 feet. Maybe the DM would rule that despite the fact that you're casting through Gaze of Two Minds, the spell still has to be within 60 feet of you, not the person you're casting it through. Which means that you are going to need to kind of hide somewhere on the battlefield where enemies aren't likely to be able to get off shots on you or see you right away, maybe a stealth check to prevent your enemies from even knowing you're there, but still be close enough that wherever your ally is, you can still cast the spells through them. And I could see DMs making that interpretation so that your character basically just isn't just straight up invincible in most combat situations because they're just not there. However, if your DM is just like, yeah, no, I'll count the person that the spell was cast from as the base for the spell, because again, that interpretation could also exist because your senses are being filtered through the enemy, so maybe that, and like your magical essence is coming through there, so maybe that could be the spell's origin point. Again, that's DM dependent, but either way, it is still extremely, extremely fun and flavorful to basically remote control a party member and give them access to your spells in a weird way. Like, again, imagine the Barbarian firing off Eldritch Blasts, or the Wizard effectively concentrating on 2 spells at once, because you have a concentration spell up, they have a concentration spell up, like, and again, you would have to be hit yourself to break that concentration, not the person who you're casting it through, so all of a sudden, you now have a very, very powerful niche in combat, where you are basically just a free extra turn for a party member, while also, you know, doing battlefield control, or maybe even analyzing a situation from a safe distance. Maybe you, for your allies, before you even start casting spells, can use their senses where they're able to see more than you, to be able to deduce what they should do next. Like, just think about it. Now you've gone from being just this investigator to, like, a battlefield commander. Okay, you can see why this is, like, why I wanted to make this build. This is such a fun concept. And I really hope that your DM allows it. I'm pretty sure they would. We can quickly also talk about some other spells that we're going to get at this level. Clairvoyance, again, another amazing spell for us. This is basically just going to help us even more with our, you know, problem-solving skills and such like that, as it is going to allow us to... Let me just remind myself of exactly of what Clairvoyance does. It has been a minute. 1 second. Yeah, Clairvoyance is going to allow you to create an invisible sensor within a range of about 1 mile from you, which will allow you to, like, you know, you can see or hear through it whenever you want to. So maybe you could set up, like, a trap, like, as you're waiting for, like, you know, maybe you set up, like, a crime scene. Maybe you're staking out a crime scene, and you put in your Clairvoyance as a trap that you're able to see or hear through to catch someone. Like, that could be pretty cool. Okay, it's not the greatest thing in the world, but, it's still cool. It could work, but we get it from our subclass. It's not something we're actively choosing. And we're also getting Hunger of Hadar. You know, really opening up the Cthulhu dimension with that one. Hunger of Hadar is obviously just going to be a great battlefield control and damage over time spell, which you and your party can take a lot of use out of. And that's the build. Yeah, 6 levels to get to what I would consider this build's kind of full power. We've built up a really strong foundation. And by total level 6, I would consider the build complete. From here, you can basically continue to gain spells, invocations, and, you know, your ability score improvements or feats by just continuing to level Warlock. So the final build could look like something like 1 Rogue, 19 in Warlock. And I think if you're playing this build for the first time, it is a little bit complicated, so maybe you do just want to keep things simple by just continuing to level Warlock and just furthering your Eldritch abilities, but I would say there's room to take levels in something like Bard if you want to. You could go for the Law subclass, which I also think would be a good choice here. You get things like Jack of all Trades, which doesn't really matter for us too much, but it could bump up your animal handling and your athletics, since we didn't take those. You could also grab, you know, other stuff from there. I think you even get another skill proficiency from Bard as well, so you could actually get that for animal handling and be basically there anyway. But Bard would give you more support abilities, you know, more psychic manipulation with things like Vicious Mockery and such like that. But I think Warlock is the most flavorful way to continue with the build. You could technically continue to level Rogue as well, bumping up your sneak attack if you find that there may be some use for that, but I feel like that's kind of wasted. However, getting access to skill proficiencies and such like that is pretty good, like, and the skill expertise, I should say. Also, but depending on your Rogue subclass, you may have some fun with things like, you know, Assassin or Swashbuckler, or, you know, you could go for Arcane Trickster as well, get that Invisible Mage Hand. You could really make things work for you, but I feel like if you want to play this build in a complete way, just continue with Warlock, keep getting those Eldritch Invocations, keep getting those powerful psychic spells, bumping up your Warlock spell slots, which are coming back on a short rest, which is also really good. And yeah, I think you just want to continue with Warlock the rest of the way, and you can choose, you know, cool stuff to use from there. But let me know what you think in the comments below. So, now that we're at the end of it all, let's get into a build summary. Let's talk about the pros and the cons of the build, before we kind of close things out for today. The pros. You have high rolls on pretty much all skills, except for a couple, with no proficiency being lower than a +4, and you have a consistent way of getting advantage on all rolls you make. But yeah, a minimum of +4 on even stuff that you're just basic proficient in is really, really good. I would think for ability scores, you kind of level up the build, you might want a bit more dexterity, you might want a bit more intelligence or wisdom, you can kind of figure that out, but you pretty much have everything you need as far as the skill monkey side of things goes. Are you as good as a multi-classing rogue bard thing? Maybe not, but you are more than good enough to handle most social situations, so long as your rolls are good enough. Your spells and features are going to allow you to pretty much solve any puzzle in a social situation, like again, lucky feat, comprehend languages and tongues, you know, everything that you have, gaze of two minds, all of it. It's just going to help you solve every social situation. You're going to be pretty much the god of the social side of things, and again, you're only level 6. This is pretty awesome. You have great battlefield control capability during combat, and pretty decent psychic damage. At the end of the day, you're still an Eldritch blasting Warlock, or a Mind Sliver blasting Warlock. You could later on take Eldritch Invocations to boost up those numbers, like your Agonizing Blast, which you can apply to either or now, which is pretty cool, any cantrip that deals damage. So really, you are going to be a pretty decent damage dealer as you keep going out for the build, but again, Hunger of Hadar, Touches Hideous Laughter, Crown of Madness, all of those things are really going to help with the battlefield control side of things and give your allies an edge in combat. Between your Psychic Spells feature and your Gaze of Two Minds feature, again, you're pretty much going to be casting spells without the need for verbal or somatic components at range through another person. That's pretty much going to keep you out of danger 99% of the time. But the best part of this build, in my opinion, is the roleplay potential. You could be as much of a deep role player as you want, and you're going to have the skills to back it up, but you're also going to be coming up with amazing and incredible strategies in every single situation to really take advantage of how, you know, your build works. You are the social deductor, you are the mystery solver, but you're also the psychic, and you can really take advantage of that in every aspect. But also, because you are this fish out of water from a totally different mythos, you really can lean into that and just see how your way of doing things, your manner of speaking, your personality contrasts with the world that you're in. Just such a fun idea. But even without that, maybe you can still just take this concept and run with it as a character within the setting. You don't have to do the whole isekai from Call of Cthulhu thing. You can just play this as a highly capable detective with psychic powers in any setting, and it's still really going to work. Like, aside from the concept, this build just works. In most situations. We do need to talk about the cons, because this build has some cons, and that is direct combat is very, very dangerous for you. Your lower HP and AC means that you can very easily go down. Again, this is somewhat mitigated by, you know, the Gaze of Two Minds, Lucky, and even later Great Old One Warlock features that I haven't talked about today, but it's still a potential issue. But seeing as we're meant to be a squishy character anyway by design, I see this more as just a catalyst for an even more clever roleplay, like I've said. However, this one is, I would say, the biggest mechanical downfall, and that is due to our low con score, our concentration saves are going to be an issue. We could lose important spell effects easily if we do end up getting hit. However, this could be mitigated by taking the Eldritch Mind invocation in the future, maybe the Warcaster or Resilient feat, but again, if you play it right with Gaze of Two Minds, Lucky, etc., again, this shouldn't really be too much of an issue. But yeah, that is the build overall. Again, feel free to look at the kind of later features of Great Old One Warlock to see how much further this build can really go. There is so much more you could do with it, like as far as you go on, but at total level 6 with 1 level of Rogue and 5 levels of Warlock, you've pretty much got the build. It just works, and it works really well. It's full of flavor. You are the skill monkey of the party. You're going to have so much going for you in that regard, and I just feel like this build has so much roleplay potential, even if you're not going with the exact concept I've laid out here, that it really does just feel like it's a build I want to play. It's a build I really want to play. Yeah, the physical stats are a downside, but again, that's the point. And let your party play into that. Let them see your value and let them bounce off you. Let your other party members be the main ones to deal with combat. Let them have their niche while you support them. And then when you're out of combat, well, I've already laid out everything that you can do. Now, if you were to keep going a Great Old One Warlock, you could get Clairvoyant Combatant, which will allow you to form a telepathic bond with a creature using your awakened mind, but now you can force it onto an enemy, which means that they'll have disadvantage on attack rolls against you as long as your minds are linked, and you'll have advantage on attack rolls against that creature. So that's another way of making you a bit less squishy in direct combat. You also will later on gain things like Eldritch Hex and Thought Shield, allowing you to use Hex in a bit more of a powerful way, and making it so your thoughts cannot be read by telepathy and you'll have resistance to psychic damage, and you can even retaliate with psychic damage whenever someone does that damage to you. And then later on, you straight up get to do what those Cthulhu cultists in our backstory were doing, and you get to summon aberrations. You just get to do it, and it doesn't even require your concentration. That's just cool. So I would personally just keep going with Great Old One Warlock. But yeah, that is the build. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Again, I'm not going to get too far into like the mechanical side of things, like DPR and such like that, because I'll be honest, that's just not who I am. If you like that sort of thing, head over to D4. Colby does amazing videos over there for that sort of thing. I just wanted to make a really fun roleplay build that has clever mechanical interactions and really just lets you play the like kind of detective archetype with a bit of Eldritch invocations mixed in, and just the Great Old One Warlock does it so bloody well that I just absolutely love it. And come on, gun-firing Eldritch blasts. That's just awesome in its own right. But yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. This is obviously a bit of experimental content. I hope my thoughts weren't too all over the place and that the build was easy enough to follow along with. But if it wasn't, then I will try to improve this format in the future. But I really didn't want to deviate too far from my BG3 style videos, because that's what I'm known for. So while some of this was scripted, and I was reading my notes in front of me, as compared to Baldur's Gate 3, where all of it is completely off the dome, a lot of what I just said was also off the dome, and I was having to look things up mid kind of recording here just to make sure that I didn't miss anything. But yeah, no, I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'm kind of proud of how it came out, the build itself, and I hope you guys will have an opportunity to try out a build like this in the future. But yeah, that is going to do it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.